Level 1, The Apprentice. Master Albrecht takes you on for room, board, and the privilege of carrying his bags, which he reminds you of constantly. Your first job is scrubbing dried blood out of glass jars in a cellar that smells like vinegar and old meat. You've never touched a sick person in your life, and you'd like to keep it that way for as long as possible. Albrecht's other apprentice, a smug older boy named Perrin, has already lanced 3 buboes and won't stop mentioning it. Your first lecture is on the 4 humors, and you understand roughly none of it but nod like you do. Fear means you're paying attention, Albrecht says, not looking up from his ledger. Uselessness means you're not. He hands you a beak mask, 2 sizes too big that belong to an apprentice who no longer works here, for reasons nobody explains. The straw and dried herbs packed into the beak make you smell like a garden that's been on fire. Your first house call, you stand frozen in the doorway while Albrecht examines the patient with his cane, never touching skin. The cane keeps the bad air at a distance, he explains, then adds, so does staying employed, which you are currently failing to do. You hold the cane wrong twice and nearly put someone's eye out before Albrecht wordlessly repositions your grip. Perrin teaches you to identify the swellings by size and color, purely so he can quiz you in front of Albrecht later. You get every answer wrong on purpose the first time just to see if he notices you're doing it. He notices. A red cross gets painted on a door 2 streets from where you sleep, and for the first time, this stops feeling like someone else's problem. Albrecht makes you carry the satchel of vinegar cloths and dried rosemary into that house while he waits outside, watching your hands. Your hands are shaking so badly you drop the satchel and the patient's daughter has to help you pick it back up. A grateful patient presses a single coin into your palm, and you stare at it like it might be a trick. You spend a week learning to boil instruments properly after ruining a set of lancets on your first attempt. Perrin corners you to say the boiled ones are acceptable, which is the nicest thing he has ever said to you. The town bell tolls for the dead every evening now, and you've started counting the tolls without meaning to. You finally settle on a mix of dried mint and camphor for your mask that doesn't make your eyes water constantly. Your second solo errand is delivering medicine to a family who slams the door before you finish your sentence. You leave the vial on their step anyway and walk home in the dark, oddly proud of yourself for the first time. Albrecht catches you practicing your bedside voice on a broom handle and says nothing, which you choose to take as approval. A wealthier apprentice from a rival household mocks your secondhand mask in the market square in front of everyone. Perrin, of all people, tells him to shut his mouth before you can. You're both equally surprised. Your bare hand brushes a patient's wrist by accident while checking a bandage, and you don't panic. You notice yourself not panicking. Your first real patient recovers under your care alone, with Albrecht only watching from the doorway this time. The family presses a warm loaf of bread into your hands, and it's the first payment you've ever earned that wasn't an insult. Albrecht examines your bandaging technique and grunts, which is the closest thing to a compliment his face is capable of. He assigns you your first night watch alone, which mostly means sitting awake, listening to a stranger's house creak. That night, you clean your oversized mask properly for the first time, instead of just wearing it because you were told to. You don't feel like an apprentice who's failing anymore. You feel like one who's simply not finished yet. Level 2, the dresser. Albrecht finally trusts you with a lancet of your own, engraved with initials that aren't yours, from an apprentice before Perrin. Bloodletting is precise work, and your first attempt leaves the patient fine, but your sleeve ruined beyond saving. Someone in the market starts calling you Albrecht's steady one, and you decide instantly you like that better than the boy. Perrin teaches you to place leeches without flinching, mostly so he can laugh at the face you make anyway. Your hands start to callous in places they never have before, from grinding herbs and gripping instruments for hours. The town starts recognizing your mask's particular patch job, and people nod at you now instead of stepping back. Your first bubo needs lancing, and Albrecht talks you through it from across the room instead of doing it himself. It goes better than you expected. You allow yourself exactly one proud thought before getting back to work. A stubborn farmhand refuses the leeches outright until you point out the alternative is Albrecht's much less gentle approach. A merchant's wife refuses to let the boy touch her, so Albrecht sends you back a week later once she's desperate enough. You dress her wounds competently enough that she apologizes, sort of, by not insulting you a second time. Perrin gets assigned to a wealthier district and doesn't let you forget it for the better part of a month. And Albrecht simply says, write it down and keep moving. You write it down, You do not, in fact, feel like moving, but you go on the next house call anyway. Your first proper suture holds steady, no shaking, and you notice the steadiness before you notice the relief. A rumor spreads that your vinegar poultice worked better than the last dressers, and for once, the rumor isn't about Perrin. You start mixing your own blend of herbs for the mass stuffing, testing camphor and mint in different ratios. Albrecht catches you experimenting and doesn't stop you, which from him is basically a research grant. Perrin's new district turns out to be having a bad week, and he comes back looking considerably less smug than usual. You don't gloat, mostly because you're too tired, but you file the moment away for future use anyway. Your camphor and mint blend fails badly on a damp week, and Albrecht makes you explain exactly why in front of him. A child patient is terrified of your mask until you let her hold the beak and decide it looks like a very serious bird. That becomes your go-to line with every frightened child afterward, and it works embarrassingly often. You handle your first full night shift alone at Albrecht's practice while he attends a birth across town. Nothing goes wrong, which feels like the loudest possible endorsement of everything you've learned so far. Perrin shares his lunch with you without being asked, which for him is basically a formal alliance treaty. Perrin admits quietly that your stitching has gotten better than his, and immediately pretends he never said it. The town council posts a notice looking for dressers willing to work the pest house wards during the next bad wave. Albrecht doesn't tell you to apply, he just leaves the notice on the table where you will obviously see it. A patient's family asks for you by name at the guild office, the first time that's ever happened without Albrecht's name attached first. You stare at your own reflection in a water basin, mask in hand, and don't recognize the calm person looking back. Level 3, the pest house doctor. The pest house ward they assign you smells like camphor, sweat, and too many people in too little space. For the first time, nobody older is standing behind you deciding what happens next. That part is terrifying. Your own mask, finally fitted to your face, arrives from the guild maker with your initials burned into the leather. The head orderly, a blunt woman named Sister Odile, tests you on your first day by giving you the worst cases first. You pass her test without realizing it was one, which she later admits was the entire point. A wave of new patients arrives faster than beds can be found for them, and you learn triage the hard way in real time. The guards posted at the quarantine gate nearly turn away a cart of patients until you personally vouch for every one of them. Perrin, transferred to a different ward across town, sends a note asking how bad it is. You don't have time to answer it. One patient you're certain won't survive the night proves you wrong by sheer stubbornness, which you will take as a win. Sister Odile starts trusting your judgment enough to leave you in charge of the ward during her supper break. A family bribes their way past the door, demanding you treat a relative who was already turned away by the guild. Yeah. You treat the relative anyway, quietly, and tell Odile only after it's done. She lets it go this once. The vinegar and dried rosemary run out mid-wave, and you send runners to 3 other wards to trade for more. The worst night of the wave leaves you triaging by lamplight with more patients than hands to help you. You don't sleep, but every patient in your section is still breathing by sunrise, which is the only metric that matters tonight. Word about that night spreads through the district faster than you expected, and strangers start asking for you by name. A terrified new orderly nearly faints on his first shift, and you talk him through it exactly the way Albrecht once talked you through yours. Perrin's ward has a rougher outbreak than yours, and for the first time, you go help him instead of gloating about it. He doesn't say thank you out loud, but he stops introducing you as Albrecht's other apprentice after that. A survivor from your worst night returns to the pest house just to shake your hand, and you don't quite know what to do with that. On the bad nights, you privately wonder if any of this is worth it. And then morning comes and you go back in anyway. Sister Odile promotes you to running the intake desk, deciding who gets which ward based on your read of each case. You catch yourself examining a patient with the exact same cane technique Albrecht used on you years ago. The town starts calling your ward the one that doesn't lose people, which is generous, but you'll happily let it stick. A weaver's whole family comes through your ward over one bad month, and every single one of them walks back out. A guild inspector visits unannounced and leaves without a single complaint, which from a guild inspector is a glowing review. Odile tells you, bluntly as always, that you've outgrown this ward and ought to know it. You look at your worn mask, the initials burned into the leather now half covered in soot and vinegar stains, and agree with her. Odile says goodbye the only way she knows how, by handing you a list of everything you still need to improve. Level 4, The town physician. The guild licensing exam is half oral questioning and half watching you work a real case without flinching. You pass with a note in the margin that simply says, capable, which from this particular examiner is a rare compliment. Your new coat is proper wax-coated leather, stiff and unfamiliar, nothing like the patched one you wore at the pest house. The town council appoints you their official physician for the district, with a modest office and an even more modest salary. People on the street actually make room for you now, the way they used to for Albrecht, which still catches you off guard. You have to turn away your first patient for being too booked, and it feels worse than any night at the pest house. Your first private patient is a merchant convinced his cough is fatal. It is, in fact, just a cough. You take on your own apprentice, a nervous younger boy who reminds you painfully of yourself 2 years ago. He drops the satchel on his first house call. You pick it up for him and say nothing, exactly like Albrecht once did. You hire a clerk to manage your growing appointment book, which feels like an absurd luxury for someone who used to sleep in a cellar. Perrin, now licensed himself, opens a competing practice 2 streets over and immediately starts poaching your easier cases. You let him have the easy ones. You've never wanted the easy ones anyway. A rival physician across town sells a guaranteed cure that's mostly colored water, and you spend a week undoing the damage. A wealthy family summons you at midnight for their ailing patriarch, and you treat him in a bedroom bigger than Albrecht's entire house. The old man recovers and insists on paying you triple what you asked, mostly despite a rival physician he dislikes more. Your reputation starts reaching households you've never actually visited, which is either flattering or slightly concerning. The town council invites you to their annual dinner as a guest of honor, in a coat far nicer than the one you actually own. A new wave of the plague hits the district harder than any since your pest house days, and the council leans on you for answers. You reorganize the town's quarantine houses yourself, using everything Sister Odile ever taught you about triage. Perrin, to his credit, shows up to help without being asked, and you work side by side for the first time as equals. The wave breaks after 3 brutal weeks, and the council publicly credits you by name at the town hall. You visit Albrecht, retired now, and he listens to the whole story before saying only, better. Your apprentice successfully treats his first solo patient and comes back grinning like he just won a war. You recognize that grin. It's the same one you wore, badly disguised, walking home with your first loaf of bread. Your name starts appearing in guild correspondence you were never meant to see, always attached to the word capable. A letter arrives from a physician in the capital, asking, carefully, formally, whether you'd consider consulting on a difficult case. You reread the letter 3 times before showing it to anyone, half convinced it was sent to the wrong person. Perrin reads it over your shoulder and says flatly, it wasn't sent to the wrong person. You believe him this time. Level 5, the Plague Master. The capital case turns out to be an outbreak spreading faster than the city's own physicians can contain. You arrive to find 3 rival doctors arguing over treatment while the ward around them quietly gets worse. You don't argue. You just start working, and eventually the others fall in line behind you instead of around you. One of the city physicians openly doubts a small-town dresser can teach him anything. He stops doubting by the 2nd day. Within a week, the outbreak spread visibly slows, and the city stops treating you like an outside consultant. A formal request comes through. Train the city's junior physicians the way you were trained, but faster and better. A collapsed tenement traps a dozen sick residents inside, and you coordinate their rescue and treatment in the same breath. You find yourself repeating Albrecht's exact phrases to nervous new dressers, and you finally understand why he said them. One trainee asks nervously what happens if they freeze up on their first solo call. You tell her the truth. Everyone does. A brief visit back to your old town has people you've never met bowing slightly as you pass, which you still haven't gotten used to. Your own refined mask herb blend becomes standard issue across 3 different guild houses within the year. A dangerously ill nobleman refuses treatment from anyone but the physician from the letters, meaning you, specifically. You treat him anyway, expecting arrogance, and instead find a frightened man who simply heard your name enough times to trust it. Word of your work spreads to towns you've never set foot in, each version of the story slightly more dramatic than the last. One version of the story claims you cured a man already in his coffin. You did not. You stop bothering to correct that one too. An outbreak in a neighboring city turns fatal fast, and you're summoned there before your current post even wraps up. You catch the fever yourself during that outbreak, the closest call of your entire career, and refuse to stop working through it. Sister Odile, hearing the news somehow, sends a single blunt letter. Don't be an idiot, rest. You mostly ignore it. You recover, slower than you'd like to admit, and go right back into the ward the moment you can stand. The junior physicians you trained keep working the entire time you're down, using your own methods to cover for you without being asked. Perrin visits during your recovery, uncharacteristically quiet, and admits he was worried. You let him have the moment. The junior physicians you trained start getting requested by name in towns across the region, which is its own kind of legacy. A formal guild ceremony names you Plague Master, a title that used to belong only to physicians twice your age. Albrecht, frail now but sharp as ever, attends the ceremony and tells you, better, which still means everything. You realize your mask hasn't needed patching in over a year, not because it's new, but because your hands have gotten that steady. A courier arrives in guild colors you don't recognize, carrying a seal from somewhere far grander than any town you've worked. Level 6, the Royal Physician. The seal is the crown's. The palace physician has fallen ill himself, and the plague has reached the royal wing. You're escorted through halls grander than anything you've stood in, trying very hard not to look as unnerved as you feel. The palace's own senior physician, humiliated at being replaced, mutters that a town dresser has no business in the royal wing. The ailing prince is guarded by physicians too afraid of consequence to actually treat him properly. You send them out of the room, the same way you once cleared a chaotic pest house ward down to just what mattered. Your cane, your mask, your vinegar cloths, the exact tools Albrecht gave a terrified boy years ago, go to work on a future king. On the 4th night, the fever spikes badly and you don't leave the prince's bedside until well past dawn. The prince recovers under your care over 11 tense days, each one reported to the queen personally. The queen appoints you personal physician to the royal household, a position with a title longer than your entire childhood. The humiliated senior physician requests a transfer within the week. You didn't ask for that, but you don't mind it either. Your quarters in the palace are bigger than Albrecht's entire practice ever was, and you still sleep with your old mask nearby. Perrin sends a letter addressed with obvious delight to His Excellency the Royal Physician, formerly the kid who dropped the satchel. You write back exactly one line. The satchel dropper says hello. He frames it, apparently. Nobles who once wouldn't share a room with a plague doctor now compete for appointments on your calendar. You train the palace's own physicians the way you were trained, cane technique and all, watching them flinch exactly like you once did. A visiting delegation asks, only half joking, whether you're the physician rumored to be untouched by the plague itself. You tell them the truth. You've had the fever twice and worked through both. The rumor grows anyway. You stop correcting it. A young palace apprentice drops his instrument satchel on his very first day, and you're the one who quietly picks it up for him. Albrecht passes peacefully, old and satisfied, and you deliver the news to his former ward yourself, mask in hand. Sister Odile is invited to the palace as your guest of honor, and immediately starts bluntly correcting the royal kitchen staff. Your former apprentice, now fully licensed, takes over your old town practice and writes to say business is acceptable. You laugh out loud. The plague recedes from the kingdom for the first time in a generation, and every account of it somehow mentions your name. You stand at the palace window at dusk, mask resting in your hands instead of on your face, watching the city's lights come on undisturbed. From a terrified boy scrubbing jars in a cellar to the physician the crown trusts with its own bloodline, you made every step of it yourself. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially at the final level. Subscribe for the next journey, leave your ideas in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.